Ready for chapters 37 and 38. Chapter 37. I staggered backwards, my mind reeling so fast it made me lose my balance. Harry was a double agent? Not someone who had betrayed my trust? I wanted to throw my arms around him in a big hug, but I couldn't let myself. Harry had no idea who the three caped heroes standing before him were, and I wasn't about to give myself away. If I knew anything about anything, it was that superheroes never revealed their true identities. Akiko and May stood there slack-jawed, staring at Harry too, so I could tell they were just as stunned. And while this was only a momentary distraction, it was enough time for the hisser to act. "Traitorous scum," he hissed, breaking free of the FBI agent's handcuffs as he transformed again. "You may have deceived me, but you'll never stop me." The hisser's hideous snake form filled the room, his scaly, serpentine body slithering around and around in a dizzying, hypnotic threat. With a whip of his rattlesnake tail, he swatted Harry and the agents. They flew backwards, slamming into the blinking black steel of the ENIAC machine. "These computers are mine now," he announced, yellow eyes blazing and fangs flashing his deadly coils around Kay, Jean, and the rest of the ENIAC 6. In one fluid motion, his slimy body squeezed, trapping them in his hideous grip, and he slithered toward the door. Before I could leap after them, he was gone. "No!" I shouted, looking for something to throw at his retreating form. "Leave them alone!" Hantima's pale shape hovered overhead as we chased the hisser into the night. "Don't give up," she urged, though her ghostly outline was quickly disappearing now. "Though evil may seem to be winning, it shall never triumph, so long as there are good people willing to fight." "Don't go," Akiko called, her voice pained. "We need you. Hantima, we're not ready." "It is we who need you," Hantima said, her silver form almost transparent. She was like a bubble floating in the moonlight. I reached out my hand as if to touch her. "The three of you, you're our last hope." And then she was gone. Akiko, May, and I were on our own. "Let's keep after him," I shouted, and concentrating on my telekinesis, I began to fling whatever I could at the hisser's scaly head, potted plants, rocks, even another trash can. May bounded behind me, hurling lightning bolts like javelins, while Akiko's shape shifted into animal form. "An otter? What are you thinking?" hollered May as she caught sight of Akiko's furry new body. "Otters aren't scary. What do you plan to do, kill him with cuteness?" "I'm a mongoose, not an otter," answered Akiko testily. "The mongoose is the snake's worst enemy." And then she lunged for the hisser's throat with her sharp front teeth as May and I dodged out of the way. I soared high above them to get a better view, and that's when I noticed the big wooden station wagon parked across the street. I'd seen it before when we first begun fighting the hisser and his bullies, but I hadn't paid much attention to it. Now the wagon's back doors were open and I could see a few figures sitting on the bench inside. "Help!" one of them shouted. "Get us out of here!" I recognized that voice right away. It was Emmett. I swooped down to the wagon doors and hovered in the air as I peered inside. Emmett's arms and legs were bound in a rope, but he'd been able to slip off the gag that was wrapped around his mouth and shout for help. 4 other boys were with him, tied up in the same way. They must have been the other puzzlers. "Begone with you, emerald irritant!" bellowed the hisser, and his booming voice hit me like a fist, sending me crashing backward through the window of the nearby bakery. Shards of glass shattered into the air. "Those puzzlers are mine." Kay and Jean, along with Marilyn, Ruth, Betty, and Fran, pounded the Histler's scaly skin, but he would not release his grip, shoving them into the wagon with the others before transforming back into his human shape. "And now that I have the computers, too, our army will be unstoppable," he said, slamming the back door onto the wooden-paneled wagon. "Farewell, losers, my submarine awaits." Snatching the sharp-edged fedora off his head, he whipped it at May and Akiko, who had come to rest on the sidewalk near the park. They ducked just in time as his dangerous hat sliced through the air, the razor-sharp rim piercing the moonlight. Branches from the trees just overhead fell to the ground in its wake, cut by the hat's deadly brim. Diving behind the steering wheel, the hisser took off down the street, tires squealing as he made his escape. "We can't let him get to his submarine," I called to Akiko and May. "He's got Kay in that wagon, and Emmett too. We have to save them, and all the others." The 3 of us took to the sky and raced right behind him, the wagon's headlights making the hisser easy to spot on the dark boulevards below. Without even having to utter a word, we seemed to know just what to do. Using our separate powers that made us each so special, we would find a way to defeat the hisser together. Akiko sprinted ahead of us, shape-shifting into what must have been a cheetah, judging by her speed. Racing alongside the hisser, she distracted his driving, causing the wagon to careen wildly down the nearly empty road. "He's going to turn left up ahead and drive down the park pathway," May shouted, using her telepathy power. "He thinks that we can get rid of Akiko that way." "Don't say our names out loud," I reminded her. "We can't let our real identity slip out." "Then we better come up with some names, Greenie. Now do your thing before he gets away." The wagon pulled to the left, just as May said it would, only the hisser's root turned crazy as he popped the vehicle over curbs and scraped into a few park benches. Then, still trying to shake off Akiko, he sped up even more and raced past a pond towards the center of the park, where a low fountain was spraying water. I stared up ahead at the stone statue that stood in the middle of the fountain. It looked familiar. A marble warrior, one arm raised in battle. Using all my powers and concentration, I imagined the statue ripped off its pedestal and hurling towards the path of the Hissler's oncoming car. As soon as I thought it, the statue followed the direction of my eyes and soared through the air, landing just in front of the Hissler's wagon. Brakes screeched, but there was no time for the Hisser to stop. The wagon's front end crumpled like an accordion. "Well done," cheered May. "He's stuck now." The wagon's horn blared into the night. With Akiko back in her superhero form now, the three of us rushed to the scene and opened the driver's door, ready for more battle. But the Hisser was still stunned from the crash, and before he could act, May slammed the door shut. Suddenly, rain began to pour inside the wagon over the Hisser's head. "Snakes hate rain," she smiled. "This should keep him miserable and powerless long enough for the cops to arrive." With May covering the Hisser, Akiko and I raced back and flung open the wagon's rear doors. We snapped Emmett's ropes as Kay, Jean, and all the other computers and puzzlers climbed out. "You guys are amazing," Emmett said, catching his breath as the police sirens grew closer. "Who are you?" I shrugged, barely able to keep myself from throwing my arms around Emmett's neck and giving him a big hug. He was safe, finally. "Who are we?" I asked, hoping my voice didn't give away my identity. "We're still working on that." Emmett nodded excitedly, running his hand over his wrist where the rope had been tied. "I wish my friend Josie were here to see this. She doesn't shut up about superheroes. Josie's never going to believe me when I tell her that some kids saved us, and not just any kids. Girls." Chapter 38. "The police are headed over," whispered May a short time later. "I think we'd better get out of here. We don't want to have to answer too many questions. Plus," added Akiko, "I think I see your mom and brothers over there getting out of that police car." The night was lit up with the red lights of police cruisers, fire trucks, ambulance, and what must have been FBI cars. As we leapt into the night sky and circled over the leafy park, a cheer erupted below us. Baby Lou's voice rose above the murmur of the crowd. "Look at those supers! Vinny told me he watched them earlier tonight flying right over our apartment building." Vinny was pointing up at us, beside Lou. "The radio report called that one the Orange Inferno," he shouted, always ready with the facts, even when he's half sleepy and wearing his pajamas. "And the other one's called the Violet Vortex. I think the reporter said he'd seen her stir up a hurricane and everything." We'd circled the treetops until we found an isolated place to land around the far side of the pond. Once we were on the ground, we transformed back into our regular selves and tried to catch our breath. "Did you hear Josie's little brothers?" asked Akiko with a gravelly laugh. "The Orange Inferno. I like the sound of that." "It's not bad," said May, smoothing down her hair and keeping pace with Akiko as we headed right back towards the growing crowd at the fountain. "But let's face it, the Violet Vortex is pretty inspired. It sounds kind of dainty, like a flower, when all at the same time intimidating." "What name did they give you, Josie?" asked Akiko. "I didn't hear Vinny say anything about you." I was walking in between them, but my steps were faster. I hadn't heard Vinny mention me either, but it didn't matter because I'd already made up my mind. "You could be the Green Guard," suggested May, giving me an encouraged look. "What do you think of that? Then maybe it sounds more like a big shrub for a garden rather than a superhero." "What about Mighty Gardener?" said Akiko. "You know, you're green like a garden and you've got the super strength. It's fitting. Or maybe the Mossy Boss, or maybe we should focus on Emmett and Kay and the ENIAC machine and what's left of the basement," I suggested, unable to hide the edge in my voice. We'd just battled one of the worst supervillains to hit town in years, and all they cared about was playing a name game. We needed to make sure the cops took the Hisser away and check on Kay, not to mention sort things out with Miss B. "Anyway," I said, stiffening my spine and throwing my shoulders back the way I'd seen Miss B do earlier today, "I think I should name myself. Why should I let some strangers do it?" If true power comes from inside us, like Hontimus said, then that's where my name's going to come from me. We rounded the corner and headed for the cluster of familiar faces. Emmett and the puzzlers were talking with the police. My family had moved away from the Hisser's wagon and was standing off to the side, far from the rest of the crowd. Ma'am was looking worried as she pulled Vinny and Baby Lou closer. "Josie, where have you been?" she called, relief washing over her face as we raced to her side. "There's been a terrible incident with Kay and the people she works with. I'd just gotten home when the police called. They sent a car to get us. The boys were asleep, but you were gone." I'd forgotten about that little detail. How to explain why I'd left my brothers alone in our apartment. I moved my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. "Please don't be mad at Josie," said a voice. "She's a good kid." I looked up and saw Harry Sawyer, make that Bill Siebold, standing there. His face looked exhausted, but his eyes glowed with a sort of hopeful glimmer. "She works hard at the diner for Gerda Gutler and me," she said, "and when Josie isn't busy with the tables and the dishes, he's helping me with the counting. She's very smart, your daughter. She tells me all the time about her dream. She tells me all the time about her dream to study math, like her cousin. What's her name? Cousin Kay?" And just then, Kay and the other women computers emerged from the police huddle. Ma'am stepped over and clasped Kay's hand, clearly overwhelmed with relief. Then he raced to her side, throwing his arms around her hips and practically knocking her over with his boisterous affection. Baby Lou ran too, though the green blanket wrapped around his shoulders made it hard for him to keep his balance. "Josie," came Emmett's voice as he joined Harry, May, and Akiko and me. "You should have seen who was here earlier. Superheroes, real ones." I smiled awkwardly at pretended disappointment that I'd missed them. But with the boys busy hugging Kay, Harry wanted a moment to talk. He turned to me, his expression somber. "Josie, I spoke a little bit with your brothers. They told me all about your dad," he said. I had to remind myself he was Bill now, not Harry. "To have fought so bravely at Pearl Harbor and the other battles, saving his men. I wish him well. Truly, your father is a hero." I wanted to break away, to race over to Kay's side like my brothers and get lost in a hug, but I couldn't make my feet move. "Not is," I said softly, "was. My father was a hero." My eyes stung, and I could feel May, Akiko, and Emmett staring at me. "Dad was killed about 10 days ago on an island in the Pacific. Ma'am got the telegram on Monday." My throat was so tight I could barely get the words out. Emmett put his arm around my shoulder. Akiko and May held my hands. The truth of it hurts so much that someone we love more than anything is gone, forever. We wanted to tell Vinny and Lou, but Ma'am couldn't do it, and neither could I. So I kept Dad alive in our bedtime stories. He's like a caped hero now, someone from our comic books. I shifted self-consciously as Kay and my family approached. We all have our ways of protecting our families. This was mine. "But we'll have to tell them about Dad tonight before Toby Hunter does it. Toby saw the telegram delivered that day," I said, wiping at a tear. "When the priest comes around with the Western Union delivery man, it's never good news. Everybody knows that. So now Toby's in on my secret, and he wants to hurt me with it." I thought about those stolen bikes we'd left in his room. When Toby's dad found them tomorrow, he was going to explode, and Toby would be in big trouble, which meant he'd come looking for revenge. He wouldn't care about how much it hurt Vinny and Lou to hear about Dad. I couldn't go on. The words knotted up in my throat. Emmett squeezed my shoulder and Bill bowed his head. We stood together in silence, and for the first time in a long while, a weight was lifted from my chest. Ma'am and I were going to have to be honest with Vinny and Lou, and it was going to hurt, but at least Toby Hunter wouldn't have power over me anymore. When Kay finally stepped over to our circle, I flung my arms around her, and even though my body ached from battling the Histler, it was the sight of my cousin safe and sound that brought the flood of tears. "I'm okay, Josie. Please don't worry. I can hardly believe tonight," Kay said a little breathlessly. "You'll read about it in the papers tomorrow, but let me say that I'm fine, and so are my colleagues. We were ready to do what was necessary to protect ourselves in the project, but the amazing part, we were assisted by the most remarkable superheroes. You would have loved it." I reached over to Baby Lou and tugged on the green blanket he'd wrapped himself in. There was enough of it to throw over Kay's shoulders and Vinny's too, on the other side of her, and even Ma'am pressed in on the far end. They stepped closer into the circle with Akiko, May, Emmett, and me, and Bill too, holding tightly to one another, and to my blanket. "This reminds me of your cape," whispered May, pointing, as if it's protecting your family," interrupted Akiko. And that's exactly how I saw it too. No matter what was ahead for us, battling Nazis and supervillains, defending top-secret projects like the electronic computer, even saving innocent lives from evil, it all came down to these people. I would do anything to protect the people I loved, and I know May and Akiko felt the same way. "Were they brave, Kay, these superheroes?" asked Akiko, eager to hear more. "Brave and bold, courageous and strong?" "Yes, of course," Kay agreed. "One had amazing powers to create wind and rain." "Atmokinesis," announced Vinny, "just like Zenobia." "Right, and another had the ability to produce fire and flames, which was stunning." "Pyrokinesis," interrupted Akiko, with a nod to Vinny, "like Hantama." They both seemed to live for times when they could show off their knowledge of random facts. I don't know which of them was more annoying and endearing. "That's the name for it, or so I've read in comic books." Vinny nodded his approval. There were really some truly terrible goons in the room, Kay said. Real meanies, as Lou would say. And then, for the first time, she seemed to notice Harry Sawyer standing in our circle, and she flinched. You! I thought you were one of them, but the FBI says you're on our side. Harry or William? What was your name? They said you were a double agent. Double agent! Exclaimed my mom, nearly jumping out of her shoes. FBI? Kay, what else happened tonight? And that's all for these chapters. Tomorrow's 39 and 40, and we finish the book.